We're both software engineers on Business Central, and today we'll continue the Copilot theme and talk about like how we see the future of AL development in terms of testing all these Copilot features. So it's a very light topic to finish Tech Days on. So yeah, for the agenda today, we'll start by explaining some of the challenges and like reasons why you actually want to bring automation to your LLM features for testing, and you know why it's important. Then we'll cover some like different test strategies on how you can tackle these scenarios, and then we'll actually dive into how we went and tested chat with Copilot. And just in case like, you're watching this online later, we do recommend watching the talk that was before this one, which is like building trust in AI and how we built chat with Copilot. And so once you understand how we tested chat with Copilot, we'll take a look at how we can actually apply this to your LLM scenarios today in AL. And kind of like in the Tech Day spirit, it's all in like work in progress. So, you know, it's all subject to change, and would love to hear your feedback on all of this. And after showing you our thoughts here, we'll wrap up by letting you know where you can get started today, and be sure that your features are all ready to be testable, and have confidence in their safety and reliability. So why do we want to test, really? So obviously there's all the like classical test reasons, but in the LLM world, there are like a few new conditions like to be aware of. So first, like how do we measure the accuracy of the feature? You know, you might have tried out the prompt a few times in, say, Azure AI Studio or like Copilot, and it seems to work. But like, do you have any kind of confidence in it working if you scale it out? Likewise, if you have a prompt already and you go and change like a word or two, or even add a sentence, how do you know if that's going to break other things? Good reason to add tests. And then on the flip side, you also want to make sure that you handle all the bad cases. So like you want to make sure that your prompt tackles all these harm mitigations that we were talking about before, you know, like asking about your manager's salary and worse. And these are kind of like the responsible AI like fundamentals that we deem very important for all your features. And so like to the extreme, like we call this like red teaming. Which could be a whole talk in itself, but essentially it's like where you are playing as the bad actor, and you are trying to like break the prompts or get it to do things that are not expected, so that you can ensure that, you know, your prompts behave well and you do not expose your end users to actual harms. So one of the first obvious challenges to actually writing these tests is where do you get all the data to build out these test data sets? And kind of the first thing you want to do is when you want to get the accuracy, you need to build a set of inputs. And you need to be careful here already, because like it shouldn't be just yourself coming up with the inputs, because then you start getting kind of biases into like how you are asking questions. So you want to get it from at least a few different people. But once you have that, you can go ahead and take that data set to an LLM and then produce a ton more examples. But then you also need to go ahead and do like some manual validation to make sure that like the samples that were generated are actually good, because obviously the LLM doesn't know. And just like your normal tests, if you have some bad examples of inputs, that's also good, because you want to test all the edge cases. And then again, for the red teaming side of things, you do need like a large data set here, like pick a number, at least 600 samples. So you can go ahead and try and build one yourself, of course. But we also have some tools available to kind of automate the simulation of like a red teaming exercise against your prompts within Azure AI Studio. Or if you are building your own output of these data sets, you can actually get them graded within Azure AI Studio as well. For example, like this is what we do with marketing text suggestions. We get these data sets, and then we evaluate like if they contain harms or not. And we'll demonstrate that a little bit later. The next challenge that you'll come across is like keeping current with all these models, because they're being updated all the time with, you know, new features, or they become cheaper, so there's like strong incentive to move to them. So the way kind of we think about it is that there are like these model families. So we have GPT 3.5 Turbo, GPT-4, and then each of these families have like minor versions underneath them. So like with Turbo, we have a model that was released last year in June, and one this year in January. GPT-4, same, last year in June there was one, and we just recently had 4.0 released as well. And so we just see that as an incremental upgrade to GPT-4. And these models may behave differently between versions. So how do you keep current with the latest one? How do you know what's going on? So I thought it would be interesting to kind of start with some examples that we have seen with like new models bringing in regressions. So this first one here, you see we had a prompt that was around drafting an email that was confirming some booking information. And so on the first model, or the original model I should say, it would always say like, dear customer, I'm writing to confirm the time of your booking. Here is all the information, blah, blah, blah. And then when we upgraded the model, we actually saw that it changed the perspective of the email, right? Because the prompt's kind of ambiguous. So it would say, hi, I just wanted to confirm, like, is this the time for my booking? And obviously that's not completely broken the scenario. So yeah, that's not a good case. And like within Business Central as well, we saw with the marketing text suggestions, you can describe, say, the Athens desk, request a tagline and a paragraph of text, marketing text. And so in the original model that we shipped with, it would produce a nice tagline and then create a new paragraph saying like introducing the Athens desk or whatever. And then when we moved to the new model, actually, it still produced like a tagline and a paragraph of text, but there was a subtle difference that it started to, rather than giving like a double new line, it would only do one new line. And as part of our like grounding checks that happen after generating a completion from the model, we actually rejected these suggestions because it's not a new paragraph technically. So that upgrade kind of broke the feature as well. So I hope this kind of illustrates some of the challenges with the model upgrades and why you start wanting to build like some kind of test matrix to validate these things. So how are we kind of taking care of this on our side? We for each kind of model family, we have like a concept of a latest model and a preview model. So for the feature that is shipped, we refer to using the latest model of the particular family. And then whenever there's a new model coming out and we want to upgrade to the newer one, we point the preview as like an alias to the newer model. And that gives engineers time to test with the new model. And then once everyone's kind of happy, we update the latest to point to the same preview version. And then we just wait till the next one comes along and repeat the cycle. And this is kind of interesting because there's like this whole machine learning ops, which previously we had nothing to do with. That was all ML engineers and data scientists, and they did their own thing. And now we're seeing the shift to LLM ops, or like even your companies might be starting this now, and you'll see that we are now famous app developers as part of the target audience. And that means we need to become aware of a lot of new things, like a lot of new metrics and evaluations. And as part of this like testing stuff for AL, we're really hoping that we can help as a platform here to make this all easier for everyone. So how do we actually test chat with Copilot? So this is a simplified diagram of what you just saw in the previous talk. And you can see here that we have many different interactions with the LLM going on here. So you can kind of just put arrows everywhere and say, yes, this is where we need tests. So for example, the very first thing of rewriting the conversation as a single message, you probably want to test that. Then once you have this rewritten message, is it off topic? You probably want to add tests for that. And then once we are invoking a particular capability, say it's looking for documentation or a record, we probably want to add tests for that. Or if it's something like that may be business related, but we don't support it right now, we also want tests for that. And lastly, of course, we should also test the actual generated chat message that we send. So tests everywhere. But actually, there are different types of tests that you should be doing. So we think of these, the first is like accuracy tests, and you can think of these as like your unit tests, the conventional unit tests, but for the LLM stuff. And you can kind of break these down even further into like your absolute tests, which is where you're being very explicit about what you're asserting. So for example, you have a conversation that's asking about your manager's salary. That should result in an off-topic result. And then the more complex example is grounding tests. So ensuring say the final chat message that you see, you want to make sure that the output there is grounded on the data that was given to it. So for example, if you look for a record, and the final chat message has a record, you want to make sure that record maps to what was returned from the skill and it hasn't just made up a new item or customer or whatever. And then secondly, you have your quality tests. And you can think of those as like your higher level, like end-to-end integration type tests. And this is where you do all your like red teaming and harms and other responsible AI checks. And they are normally quite a bit bigger and lengthy. And so the idea is that for a given scenario, so for example, chat with Copilot, you do want both types of tests, right? So you want the accuracy tests, which are fairly quick, and you can run during your development and during model updates to give you like the granular checkpoints on the different parts of the system. And then once you're kind of happy with all the changes there, you can run your quality tests for the end-to-end like feature set validation and go through all your responsible AI checks. So if I go back to this diagram, we can actually classify all these tests. So you can see that like the rewritten conversation as a message feature, that is just an accuracy test, right? Because here we are taking a conversation and generating a single chat message. And it doesn't really matter if this is producing harmful content or not, because this is passed further downstream to say the off-topic detection. And it's the off-topics detection problem to make sure that it deals with all the harms, right? So that's where you would then do the quality checks. So we can jump into maybe a concrete example here. So this is covering the rewritten conversation as a message kind of feature. And you can think of the setup of your test as the test context. So here you have like a multi-turn conversation, which is saying like, the bot opens the conversation with, hello, how can I help? User then asks what open orders are there? And then the bot would reply with, there are open orders for a sales order SO1001. And then the user finally asks, what is the amount, right? So it's already quite a complex scenario here, because you can't just say like, the user message is the rewritten conversation. So we take this whole conversation, and then we put it into the product code, and that will give us the prompt result. So again, we don't want to include the prompt within the tests. It's like kind of like separation of concerns, right? You don't put test code in prod code and prod code in test code. So yeah, you run the product code and get the prompt output. And here I've put two examples. So let's say the product gives, or the prompt gives, what is the amount of the open sales order as one example, or the other example could be, what is the amount of the open sales order SO1001? And then finally, you want to define a question, which is basically your test assertion, which in this case would be that the message contains all the relevant intent and identifiers from the conversation. Right? So in this case, the first one would fail because although it captured the intent, it doesn't contain the identifiers. So it doesn't have enough information to actually perform the query. Whereas the second one passes because that has the intent and the identifier. And so now that we have this, we can build some level of accuracy and confidence within this feature. And that means like the capabilities that consume the rewritten conversation as a message or the user intent can take that with confidence and safely kind of depend on that. So Prangshuman, do we have anything like that in AL?
Yeah, so thanks for explaining why we need to test and why it is important to test. So let's look at an example of the sales line suggestion, which has been mentioned in the keynote before. So in this in this context, so we are talking about sales line suggestion with the scenario of finding the document by reference. So here the user can ask for something like, okay, I need some items from the last sales invoice. So this is the scenario which we would like to test. So I will show you how we did it traditionally in AL, like before, without the tools what we have now or what we are building. So idea is, okay, all my user input becomes a single label, for example, and each of the label goes into a separate test, so that when I run the test in the AL test tool, I get which tests are failing or passing. You can imagine how quickly the code will churn, because you will have to keep adding new tests and keep adding new inputs, and in a way that the code will become unmanageable really quickly. But can we have something which can save us here? Let's look at data-driven tests. So that's what we are thinking. All the scenarios for AL tests, can we use data-driven tests? So what are they? So they are basically a set of data containing the test inputs, which we could use to run the test repeatedly. So you have only one test, and you can define hundreds of input, and you will run the same test 100 number of times. So rather than writing 100 different tests, you could just have one test now. This enables reusability, which in turn improves the test coverage, because now what happens is you can reuse the same test, but just vary the input a bit, and you can cover a lot more scenario. And also improves the maintainability, because now your test logic is different or separated from the test data itself. And in context of generative AI, so LLMs are very sensitive to different input variation, as Sam showed in his examples. The slight change in the input could completely change the output. So we need to test against various inputs. And sometimes, as we saw in the previous talks, how safety and evaluating safety is important. So we would like to evaluate the safety metrics, sometimes the performance metrics, like how fast does the prompt or the feature works, and what's the quality, and in case of cost, like how many tokens do we consume. So we would like to measure all these, and we are thinking of building a tool, or we are in process of building that tool to help in this situation. Yeah, so I will show you the demo of the tool. However, this big disclaimer, everything is work in progress. We will like your input in designing the tool, or right now, I guess the PR is out, you will explain later, but we would definitely need your input to design this experience and get some input from you guys. And so for example, I showed you some example tests from the sales line suggestion. This is the actual test from the GitHub repo. You can see there are so many labels for just one scenario, and I can just keep scrolling down. There are so many tests for each input. What if I tell you I can condense them into one? So let's look at the tool first. So I'll go to the Business Central. I have the extension deployed already. So I'll look for AI test suites. That's what we are naming it right now. And I can go ahead. I can import a suite. So I've exported this one. So let's do that. So I got the suite here named TechDays 24. And over here, you can see you can define the description, give a description to the suite. You have the code, and then it is asking me for a data set. So what would be the data set in case of sales line suggestions? So let's start by looking at the data set first. Yeah, so what we did, so in the data set, we are supporting JSON lines as a file type and JSON. So in this case, this is a JSON line type, which means every line is a JSON object. And in this case, our question is all the user input. So in this, one of the example is need all items from previous sales invoice. OK, but we would like to validate some fields in our test. So for example, in the case of when we are asking for a specific sales invoice, we would like to validate if the document number is correct. And in other cases, we also want to validate about the date. So you can see need all items from sales invoice from last week to today. So in this case, we expect the start date to be last week and the expected date to be expected end date to be today. These are constant because we would like to derive them in runtime because they are dependent on the system time. So we don't want to break your test when you run it next year. But yeah, so let's upload this data set. So we can go to the input data set where we can upload all the data set at once. So let's upload one of them. So the data set has been uploaded. You can see there are 28 entries in this. And what we do is we generate the description and code for you if you don't define it in the data set, so that you can refer to specific input with the code and description. And so my data set is here. All the lines were parsed and inserted into each individual lines. I can go back to the suite. And now I can assign that data set here. I can assign it to the header, which means all the lines would use the same data set here. And then we have something called AO AI model version. In this case, it's the latest. You can choose between latest and preview. At this point, we do not support it, as in a way that we do not override that. As an AL developer, you would have access to this, and in the test, you can decide which procedure you want to call, or you can parameterize it. But hopefully, if you are using AI module from Microsoft, you should be able to get this for free. And then we have the test runner. You can specify what kind of isolation or which test runner you are using. So we are using the isolation mode at this point, which means all the tests would be rolled back. So none of the transaction would be committed. And you can also give a tag to identify the run of the test, because we store every run of the test suite. We will store it and we'll log it. That way you would be able to compare it. So for example, now we are looking at the code unit, a sales line accuracy test, which is inside the lines. I can give a description, and let's see what's inside the test first before executing it. So over here, you can see we have one test. What we are doing is we want to access the data set. The way we do it now is we are creating this AI test context code unit. We will provide some helpers there, which would allow you to interact with the data set. And we are trying to standardize some of the properties in the JSON which you could define. For example, question would be a standard property. So in that case, you could just use the helper method to get the question directly rather than having to parse the JSON. And the next one, let's say the expected data document number, which won't be the standard one, but you can still use the get test input, which gives you the entire line. And since it's a JSON format, we are providing some helpers to go through the path using dot element, and you can get it as text and other properties. So similarly, for date, as I mentioned, that we are extracting the date, but we are passing it through a function. In the function, we evaluate based on the system date, what does last week, what does yesterday mean. So you can do that in your test. So once we have the expected date and the expected results and the question, which is the user input, we pass the user input to the procedure, which will actually call the LLM or the Copilot feature. And in this case, it's the sales line suggestion feature. Just want to note that none of the prompts would be exposed in the test. We are just calling the procedure underneath from the base app, or from the sales line suggestion app. So you don't have to expose the prompt themselves, just the endpoint, or you can even use test pages to access the prompt dialog properties. So you just do user test that way.
So this is just like a AL test underneath, right?
Exactly. So I forgot to mention that it's a regular test with a subtype test. So there is nothing special about this. Yeah. And you have the test property on the start of the procedure. And you can have similar experience of writing the regular AL test. So what we are doing is we get the response from the function call or from the sales line suggestion feature. And what we want to do is we are just asserting certain properties that that response should contain. The response is in a JSON format, so we can then use the same helper method to see, okay, what was the document type, what was the document number, start date, end date, and we can do the assertion. All right, having said that, now we can go back to the suite, and let's start running the test. So I did a little bit of cheating here because I'm not calling the actual feature, because I mocked the responses because it would take time, of course, to run all this test. So what you see here, the test has been run. You can see all the numbers here, how many tests passed, how many failed. And I will show you what happens behind the scene. So if I go to the AL test tool, So what we have here is, a suite would be created for you by us. So depending, we'll try to find the right suite, so we don't have to create multiple suites. So we'll find it, and once you have that, you will see all the tests. So there was only one code unit and one procedure in it. However, we have data input now. We have extended this tool as well using the added the data-driven test properties here. So all the lines has been expanded with different inputs. So if I just expand this, so you can see all test has different inputs. And you can even run the test right here. And you can also come to AL test tool, you can input the data, you can assign the data set here, expand the test line manually. But if you use the tool, everything happens automatically. And what I can do now, I can go to the log entries. In the log entries, you will see all the details. So we have the tag to identify, and each version indicates the run. So we are storing this information. And on the right, you would be able to see the test input and the duration, how much time it took, and if there were any error message, we can also log the error message. So in this case, yeah, the expected document number was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But we got 1, 2, 3, that's why it failed. So I probably need to go back and inspect my prompt. Yeah. So this is an example of sales line suggestions, how we tested it, and how we plan to now move to data-driven testing to make it easier for us to maintain the code.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's cool. So this is like a very nice example of the accuracy tests, and you're doing like an absolute assertion here, right? Have you thought about what we could do if there are more complex scenarios? Let's say, marketing text suggestions.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the first one was, accuracy test. What about the marketing text scenario? So the marketing text is generating marketing text from product description attributes. How do we test whether it's safe, whether the generated text is grounded enough, is it accurate? So that kind of test is a little bit difficult to do it in AL. So what we will do is we'll take the output of the generated marketing text, put it to an external evaluator, and get the results. So I'll show that in a moment. So before going into the test itself, so I would like to talk about the Azure AI Studio. It's a great way to start building LLM apps. It's a good playground where you can play with different models, you can play with prompts. So it's a good place if outside Business Central if you want to test it out. And there we have a tool called evaluation, which helps us evaluate the responses generated from LLM applications. So in this case, let's start by creating an evaluation. So you can give it a name, and then you can choose what kind of evaluation you want to do. So let's stick with question and answer and with context. So once we do next, so it is asking me for a test data or a data set. Okay, what is this? So this would be all the responses generated by the marketing text. That's what this would be. How do we get it? So I have a suite created for marketing text, which is like quality test. And I have the data set. So let's look at the data set first. So I have only 3 inputs. In this case, so we are using some standard properties like test setup, which would contain the setup required for running the test. So in this case, our test setup contains the information about the product, which we will use to generate the marketing text. So let's look at that code unit, test code unit for the marketing text. So here we have 2 tests. So first one is about generating tagline paragraph with inspiring tone. So again, the helper method, what we are providing, we will need your feedback, like the kind of helper method you would need, or is it even a good practice to have this? We'll probably have to discuss those things. So we can use the test context again to get the setup, which would be used to generate the marketing text. And in the format, I'm specifying, okay, I need a tagline and a paragraph, and the tone, I want it to be inspiring. And the facts is basically converting the test setup. I'm converting the properties of the JSON into a dictionary, because I want to reuse the function which we use for marketing text. And again, this one, there is no prompts inside the generate marketing text function. It would make a call through the exposed procedures, and that would generate an answer. In this case, the answer is the marketing text. You would ask, why am I formatting question, answer, context in a particular format? We are doing that because our external tool, the Azure AI Studio Evaluator, requires the data set to be in a certain format. That's the only reason why we are sticking to this, which is being standardized. So the context, so here the context will become the facts about the product. So because that's what will govern, is your response grounded or no? And the question, since this feature does not have a prompt dialog, there is no place where user can go and input something. So we have to build this question. So the question here is a task, which we are artificially making and saying, OK, create marketing text for an item with inspiring tone and with the tagline and paragraph. We are just creating a very simplified task. And that is what we'll use for evaluation. And yeah, finally, how do we output the data from the test tool? So we will use some procedures, again, like helpers, which in this case, it's set test output. And you can pass question, context, question, and answer in that format. And what will happen is, so we'll do that. But let me show you the second test. In the second test, everything is almost the same. Only thing what I'm changing here is the tone, because I want to also test whether if I used formal or if I use inspiring, my evaluation should be the same. Like, it should be safe, it should be grounded. It should not impact that. So let's look at the suite. So we have the test here. Let me run this. So I have assigned the input data set already. And once I start it, so yeah, before that, let me hide this. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
How many tests would you think has run behind the scene?
Yes, so just so I understand what's going on here, right? We're trying to use the test tool within the AI test tool within Business Central to generate a data set as the test output that we can then input to the Azure AI Studio to run the evaluation. And so you've written 2 tests, and your data set has 3 entries.
Correct.
So because it's a data-driven test now, that would be 3 times 2.
Exactly.
So we have 6.
That's perfect answer.
Yeah.
So yeah, now you can see we have run 6 tests. We can go inside this and have a look. So you can see all the procedure names. So there are 2 procedure per code unit. And on the right, we can see the input. You can see the code that it has run for. Same input was run against 2 different procedures. That's why, yeah, as you said, we have 6 tests. But now we also have a field called test output. So in this case, the test output is what we sent out from the test, which has the context, question, and the answer. So let me just download the test output from here. So here, the file which gets downloaded is the entire list of test output in the view. And let's go back to the evaluation tool in the Azure AI Studio. So there we will add our data set. Let me upload the data set that we just generated and let it parse. So you can see here, you get the context, you get the question, you get the answer. And let's try to run the tool. OK, so before running the tool, of course, you would have to configure which metrics you are interested in. So you can choose from evaluating groundedness, relevance, coherence. So we won't go into details about each of the metrics, but definitely you would have the option to read into it and understand the different metrics. Other thing to point out is you would need an open AI model deployment for this for now. And then the other one is you can choose the risk and safety metrics you would like to evaluate. So you can choose whatever you want in your case, and then, you can submit the job. So this takes a bit usually because it schedules a job in the background. It takes some time to run as well. So instead of showing the result from that, I already have evaluated the same output before. So I've just done the evaluation for groundedness. So in this case, it says, OK, all of the responses were grounded. So it gives the score between 1 to 5. So this looks good. We can also manually verify those. And the risk and safety part is, was the output generated safe enough in different context? So you can go there and have a look. So that's the good part. But again, we won't usually run the safety and risk and safety metrics for normal inputs. Usually we do that when we are doing red teaming, because when we are forcing the system to do something wrong, that's when we use it. And for example, So if I go to the input data set, so I would imagine like the harmful data set can contain as big as like 1,000 inputs. So, and it would be painful to write individual tests for each of them. So that's why we think this is the future for testing, hopefully. And you can, of course, give us feedback. And we have this sensitive flag, which you can turn on so that you don't expose end user with this. Yeah, so we also have comparison metrics. You can compare different things. Right now, we give out of the box how many tests failed and what was the duration. But in future, if you're using the AI module from Business Central, we would be able to, hopefully be able to give you token consumption and response time so that you can compare your prompts and play around while building the application. And of course, we are also thinking about integrating the external metrics and provide some of them out of the box. But this would be in the future, even further future.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So now where can you guys all get started? So the very first thing we want to call out is we have the pull request for the AI test toolkit on the first AKA MS link. Definitely check it out. We're really keen to get feedback on all the test helpers that we have available there, like get input, get user query, set output, if you need more, but also like the general design discussion like that we're building on top of the test tool and all that kind of thing. Secondly, I know this has been shared a few times already, but I've got the link here again. If you want to give the private preview of the Business Central Managed AI Access a go, there's the AKA MS link there for the sign-up form. And for trying out the Azure AI Studio you just saw, you can get that at ai.azure.com. And then just some general guidelines here is that you should think about when you're writing your LLM scenarios to write code that wraps around the prompts quite nicely, and you'll be able to get to from an AL test. And then that should be able to integrate nicely into the test tool later on. And also generally for all the Copilot stuff, ensure your AL metadata with all your objects like the tooltips, captions, that they're clear and easy to understand with like limited context, because obviously this is good for your users, but it also helps out Copilot like finding records and that kind of thing. So I'll share some more links. Again, you have the test toolkit. Definitely talk to us as well on Viva Engage. If you want to learn more about all the Copilot features, it's BC AI. If you want to start developing with the Copilot developer tools and you don't know where to start, we've got the BC Start Coding with AI Learn, the very short link. And if that's too many links, just remember aka/BC all, and that's like the link of links. So you'll hopefully find what you're looking for there. And kind of to wrap up, I think I'll finish with a video which kind of showcases all the Copilot features that we have in the product today. And hopefully you can see why it brings us a lot of value to have test automation here, but also like why it would be good to have test automation as you introduce your LLM features on top. And yeah, hopefully it's a bit inspirational of the kind of what can be done with these generative AI technologies.
Keeping up with the pace of work can be challenging, especially when your business is adapting and growing. Transform the way work gets done with Microsoft Copilot and Dynamics 365 Business Central, your everyday AI companion. Save time by asking questions to find what you need. And onboard quickly with Copilot to guide you as you develop new skills. Accelerate sales and spark creativity with marketing text suggestions tailored to your unique brand, using details already in Business Central like color, size, and material. Use Copilot to create sales quotes, orders, and invoices faster and easier than ever before, so you can invest time in relationships instead of paperwork. Simplify your day-to-day by automating business processes with Power Automate flows. And reclaim time for your most impactful work by using Copilot to keep your finances organized, from reconciling bank statements to matching purchase orders with e-invoices. All while using analysis views to make data-driven decisions that propel your business forward to new levels of success. Work smarter, adapt faster, and perform better with Microsoft Copilot in Business Central.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. That's like everything. you got any questions, let us know. Yeah, I'll let you.
So with the AI test toolkit, do you guys envision that as for purely like manually running it, or do you guys think maybe there'd be a use case for running it in like CI/CD pipelines if, say, these files for this feature were modified?
Yes, definitely. We are thinking about that. Like we would be, eventually we'll start with the tool first being working. Then the next step would be to integrating in the CI/CD pipeline. So we have not thought about how it will work with GitHub and everything. So we'll have to discuss that. But we need to first test it out also internally. Okay. So yeah, but that's the goal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Automate all the things, right?
Yeah, because even the small model change requires a lot of testing from our end.
Yeah.
It's all the risk and safety mitigation. So we would like to automate that.
Sam, I have a question. Oh, maybe for you. In one of the demos for the sales marketing test, you showed that in the test you had a label. Yeah. So please generate for me a marketing test for these items. However, in the base app, this is part of the prompt. So you have this in the prompt as well.
Not exactly.
Because
this is the user input, what the user would type.
But there is no input mode. There is a generation mode out of the box.
No, there is a prompt dialog. You see. So if you.
It's on you, right? Oh.
It's on the slides.
Go for it. Okay.
Yeah. So.
No.
So this one.
Not
so
this
one. This is the sales line suggestions. Where user would input here in the prompt box.
Yeah. No. Another one with the
marketing
text.
Yes.
Yes.
So the marketing text, so you don't have any. User cannot input anything there.
Yes.
User controls that, like which attribute goes in. So that's why, as I showed you, we built a context and we built a question. So the question what we built was a very basic one, like create marketing text.
Yeah, so
that would have a part of the prompt, but not the entire prompt.
Yeah, that was the question. So I mean that for this Copilot, you generate this user message as well in the Copilot.
Yes.
So it means that you have this in the Copilot, and you have the same in the test.
Yes, we will have to give some task. Like we are creating a task, like what is because the external evaluation tool requires a task to be able to judge, like did it do the task, did it perform, generate the response correctly or no. So for that, we somehow have to give a small action, like what's the task this LLM app is doing. So that's the thing we had to expose or give it a small, because what happens behind the scene is a lot more than what we just gave. We are not giving the entire meta prompt and system prompt.
But how do you pass the system prompts to the test?
Yeah, maybe yes. So the user input for the marketing text suggestions tests, that's not quite the prompt, right? It's a list of item attributes, and these item attributes, they get converted to a dictionary, which is what the product code expects to receive to generate the user message in the final prompt that gets sent to the LM. Right. And I forgot the second bit.
Yeah, so the system prompt right now, I don't think we have helpers to get that into this. Maybe you could expose it internally, like when you're writing tests. So if you want, you can expose that as a procedure, like, okay, get me the system prompt, if you want to do that. But normally, what happens in the market index, there is a lot more than just the item attributes. There's a lot of other prompts, but we are not exposing those.
The question was, so the question is, if I build my own test for my Copilot, in my Copilot, I have this line of code, add system message, and then add user message. I want to make a test for that.
Okay.
So I didn't see in your examples where I pass my system message to the test.
So again, so it depends on the test you want to do. Let's say you want to evaluate everything in AL. So the sales line suggestion. So what we are doing is we are just directly calling, so we can pass the user input using even test pages. Like if you have a prompt dialog, if you have that kind of feature, so you can call test page dot set input and then do the generate action. And once the generate action is done, whatever you get in the content box, you can read that and do the evaluation there. So in that case, you are not exposing any prompts in the test. You are just interacting with the test page. That's one scenario. The other scenario in the marketing text, where we are generating some content, which we cannot evaluate, like, okay, you want to check the grammar of the sentence. You can't do that. It's not easy in AL. You would have to call some external service. So in this case, if your external evaluator tool, whatever you write, requires you to expose the prompt, then you would have to. If it doesn't, if it can work without exposing the prompt, then you don't have to. So it's up to you. In our marketing text, what we are exposing is the task, as in what's the basic task. Okay, I want to create a marketing text with this tone and with this features, but not more than that.
It's like the assertion that you're doing, right? So if maybe I go back to the slide. Can I go back easy? No, I'll just do this.
But we can also discuss more in the scenario.
Absolutely, yeah. Where's it here? Yeah, this one, right? So in the bottom right, you see here the question, which is that the output is asking for the open sales order amount and references the identifier, right? So yes, that is a prompt, but it's not your system prompt. It's not the user input. It's the test assertion. It's called the question, which I guess that gets a bit confusing with the naming. Yeah. We're over time, so if you want to go.
So if you have any more questions, we are here, so you can feel free to come here and Thank you so much for attending the session.
Yeah, thanks.